All right, get ready for a deep dive. We're going way back in time with this one. Education in ancient Tamilnadu. We're talking centuries before and after, the start of the Christian era. And I gotta say, it's way more fascinating than I ever thought it'd be.
It really is. It's really interesting, too, because, when we talk about ancient Indian universities, Taxila and Nalanda are usually the names that pop up. But Tamil Nadu, it had these thriving centers of learning, too. They just kind of get overshadowed sometimes.
Yeah, it's like a whole hidden history of education, right? And this book, this Education in Ancient Tamilnadu by Amber Rajalam, really brings it all to life.
Absolutely. And it paints this picture, like this vibrant picture of these bustling universities and all this advanced technology and like this really deep respect for knowledge that was just all throughout their society.
Okay, so let's start with these lost universities. The book mentions like a first and second university in South Madurai and Kapatapuram, tragically swallowed by the sea.
It's pretty wild to think about, right?
I mean, can you imagine like a university with 4,449 professors?
It's a mind-boggling scale, right?
Yep.
Like that alone, and just the fact that these universities were led by royal poet chancellors. I mean, it highlights how intertwined scholarship and the arts were in ancient Tamil society.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, what were those lectures even like, But even though those universities are lost, we still have these historical records of the third university at Madurai. Like, it flourished for at least 500 years.
Yeah.
From around 300 BC to 200 AD.
Right. And it's important to remember that this wasn't just some exclusive place just for like the elite. The book really pushes back on that idea.
Yeah, you're right. It mentions that even wandering bards who were described as members of backward communities, they were like well-versed in different disciplines. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it is.
It makes you wonder, like, how did this society foster such a widespread value for learning? How did they do it?
That's a big question, right? What were the cultural and societal structures that allowed, knowledge to be so accessible, across different social groups?
Okay, so let's talk about what they were actually learning. It wasn't just the reading, writing, arithmetic, right? They had this ideal education that covered like a mind-blowing 64 arts and sciences.
Yeah, it's like a testament to how much they valued a well-rounded education.
Totally. And they covered everything from literature and military skills to even like the study of magic.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
Magic, seriously.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm really curious. What kind of magic are we even talking about here?
Well, the book, it doesn't get into like super specific detail, but it mentions practices that had to do with astrology, medicine, and like rituals and stuff. Yeah.
Oh.
It suggests that they saw some kind of connection, between the natural world and the supernatural. That's so interesting. But alongside those more, I guess, mystical subjects, they also had these practical texts on things like elephants, horses, and even poultry farming.
Yeah.
I mean, ancient Tamils had poultry farming guides. Who knew?
It just goes to show how diverse their intellectual interests were, right?
Yeah.
And this desire to just to record knowledge, across all sorts of different fields.
Yeah.
Like imagine what you could learn from a treatise on poultry from that time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it'd be like a window into their agricultural practices and daily life and all that.
Exactly.
It wasn't just about arts and agriculture though, right? The book also talks about some really incredible feats of engineering. I mean, they built the Grand Anicut Dam by 100 BC, and let's not forget about their siege weaponry. Imagine these machines that could launch huge boulders at fortresses. Like it really challenges how we think about the technology of the time.
Oh, for sure. And it shows, how important it is to look beyond, the typical historical narratives. You know what I mean?
Totally. Okay, so they had this huge curriculum, this impressive technology. But here's where it gets really interesting to me. Like the book really emphasizes the importance they put on character development.
Yeah, it wasn't just about, learning things or mastering skills, right?
Okay.
Education in ancient Tamil Nadu was deeply connected to shaping ethical and moral people. They understood that knowledge without character could be dangerous.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just this vague idea of be good, The book actually has like specific quotes about how learning should shape how you act. And it even lists these eight traits of a good person. Things like like gratitude and tolerance and compassion. It's like they had an ancient character development program.
It's true.
Yeah.
And when you think about that in the context of their whole society, it suggests that they believed well-educated people had this responsibility to use their knowledge to benefit everyone.
So it was more than just about like personal gain.
Exactly.
It was about giving back to
Yeah.
something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And it's a perspective that's really powerful even now,
Totally. Yeah. Okay, so how did they teach all of this? I mean, we're talking centuries before modern classrooms and all that technology. Like the book talks about the teacher-student bond as this really immersive experience, almost like a lifelong apprenticeship kind of.
Yeah. It highlights this idea that learning wasn't just like a transaction, right?
Right.
It was this transformative relationship.
Yeah. Teachers were so respected, almost like revered figures. And the book really gets into like the specific qualities of an ideal teacher, like a vast knowledge, endless patience, a willingness to teach without being paid.
Right. And maybe the most important thing is that a teacher needed to be able to answer any question that a student might have,
Yeah.
It paints this picture of teachers as these really dedicated mentors, guiding students not just in their studies but in their lives too.
Yeah. And get this, the book uses these vivid analogies to describe different kinds of teachers. Like good teachers are compared to sturdy mountains, while bad teachers are like crooked coconut trees that drop their fruit for strangers instead of the people who took care of them.
It's such a vivid way to explain that, right? Like the importance of a teacher's dedication and the impact that they can have on their students.
For sure. And speaking of dedication, like students started their education super young. They lived with their teachers, did chores, and were expected to be all in on the learning process.
Yeah.
It was a totally different world.
It was. It really shows that learning wasn't just something that happened in one place or at one time. It was part of everyday life.
Okay, before we move on, I just want to ask you, like, what stood out to you the most so far about this ancient way of teaching?
I think it's how seamlessly they blended intellectual rigor with character development. Like they didn't see those things as separate. They were all part of a well-rounded education.
That's a really powerful idea. It makes you think about how we approach education now.
Yeah, it does. But before we get too philosophical here, let's talk about another really interesting thing the book brings up: the role of women in ancient Tamil education. It might surprise you to know that women weren't just educated; they were also like active participants in intellectual and artistic stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think this is the perfect spot for us to pause and pick up in our next session. We'll dive deeper into the world of women poets, scholars, and artists in ancient Tamilnadu.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's a story that needs to be told.
Welcome back. So last time we were starting to uncover this surprising role that women played in ancient Tamil education. It's a side of history you don't really hear about that often.
No, you don't, and it's definitely something that needs more attention. The book, it highlights some truly remarkable women who challenged those social norms and made these huge contributions to their fields.
Yeah. Like Avai, right? This amazing poetess who came from like humble beginnings but ended up becoming an advisor to kings. The book mentions her sharp wit and wisdom. Apparently it's still like legendary even today.
Yeah, it is. Her story is a real testament to the power of education, right? Like to go beyond social barriers.
Right.
And she's just one example. The Sangam anthologies, which were these collections of ancient Tamil literature, they feature like over 30 women poets, each with their own unique voice and perspective.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think of these women's words, like echoing through all these centuries. So what else did the book reveal about women's education? Was it mostly focused on literature, or were there other areas they kind of excelled in?
Oh, it was way broader than that. The book emphasizes that training in fine arts was a key part of women's education. There are these really detailed descriptions of dance graduation ceremonies and the high skill level involved.
So they weren't just like, dabbling in the arts. They were really, really good at it.
Exactly. They were masters. And it wasn't just about, artistic expression either. The book, it kind of suggests that these skills were also seen as as valuable assets, like in social and political settings.
Yeah, that makes sense. Art has always been a powerful way to communicate and to influence.
For sure. And then we also see stories like that of Tamil in Perumal, who said she would only marry someone who could outsmart her in a debate. It shows the intellectual ambition and agency that women had in ancient Tamil society.
It's pretty inspiring, honestly. Like, it really challenges our assumptions about the role of women in those ancient cultures.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it backs up this idea that access to education has always been so important for empowering people and for making a more equal society.
Speaking of access to education, let's go back to those teacher-student dynamics where we were talking about earlier. The book, it describes the ideal teacher with such reverence. But I'm curious, like, did they have any kind of system for ensuring quality education? Like making sure teachers were actually good at their jobs.
Well, the book doesn't really mention any like formal evaluations or certifications or anything like that.
Okay.
But it does emphasize how important it was for the community to be involved in education. It suggests that teachers weren't just, accountable to their students, but to the whole village.
So it was like a more communal approach to quality control.
Right, exactly.
Did they have any ways of dealing with teachers who weren't living up to those high ideals?
The book doesn't really address that directly, but it does highlight that students had the right to question their teachers, and to ask for clarification on anything they were unsure about. Yeah. It suggests that students actually had the power to hold their teachers accountable for their teaching.
That's an interesting perspective. Like, it implies a level of respect for the student's voice and their role in the
Yep.
learning process.
Yeah, totally. And it reinforces the idea that education wasn't just a one-way street.
Right.
It was this dynamic exchange between teacher and student where both were contributing to the learning experience.
Okay, let's shift gears a little bit here. So we know they had this incredibly diverse curriculum, from the arts to military strategy. But how did they actually structure the whole learning process? Was it all just lectures and memorization?
No, not at all. The book talks about a much more dynamic and interactive approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it stresses active engagement, critical thinking, and a deep respect for both oral and written traditions.
So it was about more than just like passively absorbing information,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. The text, it highlights like how important it was to really listen to the teacher's instructions, and to have discussions with other students, and even to look for opportunities to teach other people, to really solidify your own understanding.
That's fascinating. It's like they understood the power of learning by teaching, which is something we still talk about today.
Yeah, exactly. And it wasn't just about, blindly accepting what the teacher said either. The book, it encourages students to question, to try to really understand and to make connections between different ideas.
So they weren't afraid to challenge their teachers.
No, not at all. The text describes these lively delights and discussions where students were encouraged to offer different perspectives and to really hone their arguments.
Right.
It was this really stimulating environment where knowledge was actively constructed, not just passively received.
It makes me think about those lost universities. If this kind of active learning was happening even in smaller settings, like, can you imagine what it was like on those bustling university campuses?
Look, it's so exciting to think about, right? Those universities must have been these hubs of intellectual energy with scholars from all different disciplines, having these lively discussions and pushing the boundaries of knowledge.
Yeah, it's like a little glimpse into a lost world of learning.
Yeah, it really is. And while we may never fully understand the extent of what they achieved, the things we learn from this book really paint a vivid picture of an education system that valued intellectual rigor and character development.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that the pursuit of knowledge has always been this driving force in human history. And even though the methods and contexts change, the basic principles of learning and inquiry, they stay pretty timeless.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it leads us to another really interesting question. if learning wasn't limited to these formal institutions, what did the actual places where education happened in ancient Tamil Nadu, what did they look like?
Ah, yes, the classrooms of that era, right?
Exactly.
Let's delve into that after a quick break. Okay, so back to ancient Tamil education. We've talked about the lost universities, the focus on both intellect and character, but like I'm really curious about what the actual learning environments, what they looked like back then.
Well, you got to remember, formal institutions like what we think of as schools today, they didn't really exist in ancient Tamil Nadu.
So no big lecture halls or sprawling campuses or anything.
Yeah.
Where did the learning actually take place?
Well, the book paints this really, really kind of charming picture, actually. It describes how the teacher's home was often the main learning space. Yeah, imagine like these platforms built under the shade of big trees, serving as both like a classroom and a place where the community could gather.
So it's like nature was their classroom.
Yeah, pretty much.
I can just imagine like students gathered under a banyan tree, listening to their teacher.
Yeah, it's a nice image, isn't it? It speaks to like a different pace of life, a closer connection to nature. And these weren't, huge schools with tons and tons of students either. The book suggests that the classes were usually pretty small and intimate, which allowed the teacher to give a lot of individual attention.
So it was more like a mentorship or an apprenticeship,
Yep.
right? Where knowledge was passed down through direct interaction and shared experiences.
Exactly, yeah. And it wasn't just about, formal lessons either. Students were expected to help out with chores around the teacher's house, learning those important life skills right alongside their academic stuff.
It sounds like a really, really holistic approach to education,
Yeah.
integrating learning into every part of daily life. But it makes me wonder, like, if there weren't, actual school buildings, how do they make sure everyone had access to education?
That's a great question. The book really stresses how important it was to have a teacher in every village. It even says that a village without a teacher was bound to suffer. Really emphasizing how vital education was for the well-being of the whole community.
So it wasn't just about individual progress then. It was about improving the whole community through education.
Exactly. And while the actual physical spaces where learning took place might have been different, their dedication to making sure everyone had access to education seems really forward-thinking, even by today's standards.
It really does. It really makes you think about what we can learn from these ancient approaches to education.
Yeah.
It's easy to get so caught up in the modern focus on grades and test scores and career paths. But this deep dive, it's reminded me that education can be so much more than all of that.
It's about, nurturing that curiosity, that critical thinking, and a lifelong love of learning. It's about developing, well-rounded people who are ready to contribute to their communities and make the world a better place.
And it's about recognizing how transformative that teacher-student relationship can be. And not just as a means to an end, but as a journey of growth and discovery for both the teacher and the student.
That's a great way to put it. And as we wrap up this amazing deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought. Imagine if you could bring back just one thing, just one element of ancient Tamil education into the world today. What would you choose, and why?